Before I go any further, I just wanted to pass on my congratulations to Gordon and the team for putting on this event, because I can only imagine how difficult it's been just pulling all of this together. So well done. I'll look forward to Climb24 next year. In terms of my participation today, I'm here wearing two hats, really, figuratively speaking. First of all, of course, I'm here representing the British Business Bank, but really usefully for me and for you, you've already heard from Sophie, who's given you background on the Business Bank and what we do. So that allows me to jump straight to the second reason I'm here, and the main reason, to be truthful, which is I'm also a member of the task force for women-led high-growth businesses, which was established by the Cabinet Office last year. Now, in terms of the background to this task force, so what it's there to do and what it's found so far, Zandra and some of the other task force members will tell you more about that in a few moments. What I can say, though, is when the invite came through last year asking me to join, it was a really super quick decision for me to say yes. And that's because issues facing high-growth female founders have been there for a long time. And it's something that the British Business Bank really tries to shine a light on in terms of raising awareness as to what those issues are. What I will say, though, is that when I joined the task force, I didn't know at that point who my fellow task force members would be. And ladies and gentlemen, what I can say is that I've been totally blown away by the passion and the conviction and just the grit that these really inspiring female entrepreneurs are bringing to this issue. You can see them hiding there behind the corner at the moment, giggling away.
I'm going to hide with you. I'll be back in a minute.
Okay. So it's an absolute honour and a privilege for me to stand alongside them on the stage. And I'd just like to say to each and every one of you, I salute you. Well done. So, thank you. So what I do want to do in the few minutes that I have on the stage is just shine a light at a national level on some of the issues that high-growth female founders face. And what I'll do is I'll look at this from the perspective of funding, and in particular equity funding, which is what these sorts of businesses typically need. What I want to do to give a bit of structure to this is look at it from the perspective of supply of equity funding, demand for equity funding, and then ecosystem issues that link the two together. Okay, so taking them one by one, just thinking about supply. And, well, first of all, there is some good news in that in 2021, which is the last data set that the British Business Bank has published figures for, what we know is that there were 161 deals and £320 million which went to all female founder businesses, and that's up 60% on 5 years earlier. So far so good. That is good news. However, when you then look at, well, how much money is going to all male founders and also mixed gender founders, they've also gone up massively over the same period as well. So what we can see is that comparatively speaking, we are still in this situation for every £1 of equity that's invested, only 2p in the pound is going to all female founder businesses. That's compared to 84p gone to all male founder businesses and 14 to mixed gender. So I know that's quite a stark statistic. And if you remember nothing else from what I've said today, just remember that figure of 2p in the pound. We need to change that because what we know in addition, as well as it being really hard for female founders to get equity funding in the first place, it's then equally hard for them to get subsequent rounds. And even when they do get subsequent rounds of funding, they raise less money. So we've got a triple whammy of supply-side issues going on for female founders. If we then turn the lens and look at this from the demand side and look at, well, what are the issues that female founders perceive there to be in terms of trying to access equity funding? And the key things or the key issues that are evident there, this is all based on BBB research, British Business Bank research. The key issues are around awareness, connectivity, and confidence. And just to give you, put some meat on the bones for that, we know from annual surveys that when we ask founders why they haven't accessed equity, we know that female founders are 25% more likely to say they don't know how to put together a good business case to approach a venture capital investor with. We also know that female founders are 15% more likely to say they don't know where to go. And they're 20% less likely to say that they know what equity is all about. So there's a real mix of issues going on there. We also know that for female founders, they're less likely to know other entrepreneurs. They're also less likely to have mentors or sponsors. So we have a cocktail of issues here on this demand side which we need to unpick and try and address. Finally, on this ecosystem bit, this is how we put the two sides together, supply and demand. And this is very much about venture capital firms, fund managers. The key thing to remember in this regard is that we need more females at all levels within investment teams. We also need more females at senior levels to be decision makers on investment committees. Why is that? Well, we have evidence to show that the more females there are in investment teams, then the more likely a proposal from an all-female team is to progress through the different stages of a funding process. It's the same with an investment committee in that the more female decision makers you have, the more likely it is that a female proposal will get support. So there's strong evidence there to back all of that. And whilst progress is being made, so the British Venture Capital Association published a report earlier this year showing there was an improving trend, it's an improving trend from a very low position. So there's a long way to go yet. So that's a whistle-stop tour there across supply, demand, and ecosystem. And so just I'd very quickly like to have a look at, well, what's actually going on at the national level in terms of initiatives to address these issues. 3 things I'd call out. Firstly, the Investing in Women Code, which I think many of you will hopefully be aware of already. But the Investing in Women Code was established in 2019, and it currently has 160 signatories spanning banks, venture capital companies, business angel syndicates, and other stakeholder groups who are interested in this particular topic. What the code brings these financial organisations together to do is to put a firmer focus on female founders. And there's evidence already that the signatories who've signed up to the code do have a higher proportion of female deals within their investment portfolios. So it's starting to work compared to what you see with non-signatory firms. So we really need to see more firms signing up to the code. That's number 1. Secondly, as well as ourselves at British Business Bank putting a lot of time into researching this topic and trying to shine a light, we're not alone, and there are lots of organisations out there who are doing the same. So in terms of ones I'd particularly call out, there's the BVC, British Venture Capital, I've mentioned already, Level 20, Diversity VC, UK Business Angels, and I'm sure I'll have missed lots out. But there are more and more joining, which is absolutely fantastic in terms of raising awareness of this. But there's more we need to do. We'll never reach the end, and we just need more and more focus on this area. Final thing I just call out, we've now got 2 task forces. that are focusing on this topic. The roles review, which I think most of you will be aware of already, and of course the task force that I'm a member of, as well as various colleagues who are standing over there. So I've run out of time. I was given about 8 minutes, so that's it. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that of interest, and I'll hand over to my colleagues. Zandra Moore is joining us next. And Zandra's going to give us the regional and personal perspective.
Joel. Thank you, darling. Hello, everybody. Should we wake you all up a bit? I'm not going to beatbox. No. Not very good at that. Thanks, Judith. Amazing introduction to what is quite a challenging subject. And she's covered 3 main issues today: supply, demand, and ecosystem, which I'm going to share a few personal stories around. So my name's Zandra Moore. I'm a CEO and founder of a data analytics software business here in Leeds, a global business that back in 2014 wasn't a business. I was really lucky because I had a role model at home. I had a mum that fell into the tech sector. She was the eldest of 7 children from a single-parent family. She opened up the Yorkshire Post, applied for an ad for one of the first internet service providers here in Leeds called Planet Online. She went on to work with Ajaz Ahmed, who's in here today. I've seen him walking around, actually. The start of FreeServe, the first free email service. She also worked for In Technology, which was a tech distributor. So when I left home, I just wanted to be my mum. I just wanted to work in tech. It was easy for me. I had an aspiration and a role model. I found myself 10 years into my career becoming a director of various small startup software businesses, and then became a mum. And I had a tough decision at 30. Do I stay at home because 16 years ago there was no shared parental leave, or does my husband? And I made the decision. And that was my first step in self-employment and growing my first business. My first business was a sales consultancy into tech companies, and what I found myself doing was meeting a great guy called Ken, who's my co-founder, working for another business, building a smart bit of data analytics tech that actually we could take outside of the business and do something with. We had an opportunity to do a management buyout, and with the support of friends, families, some seed investors, high net worths that we knew, we took the bold decision, convincing my husband to empty our bank account, to buy the IP. And in 2014, Pan Intelligence was born. Pan Intelligence is now a high-growth enterprise, the purpose of this task force. We've raised 6 million over various rounds of funding, and from a very small lead startup where we carried the server across the car park and squatted in someone's office for a few months until we could get a bank account, we found ourselves now with a business that's global, customers all over the world, and we're doing it all from Leeds. But if you'd have asked me 5 years ago what any of this meant or how to go about it, I'd have said, I haven't got a clue. I've got the bingo card for investment. I've got high net worths. I've got PE, that's VCT. I've got VC. I've got family offices, family and friends. I could go on. So I've pretty much done the bingo card of investment. But let's start with demand. Back to the point that was made earlier. You just don't know what you don't know. And as women, we don't have the same networks as men. I go back to Judith's stat. Women are 20% less likely to know about how to raise funds than men. It's just that simple. We had interest 4 years into our journey at Pan Intelligence to acquire the business. Our seed investors, the people that had originally given us the support, thought, great, let's flip the business in 4 years. Myself and my co-founder weren't ready. I was so passionate about what we were doing. I wanted to be able to continue on that journey, but I had no idea where to start. There was a plucky guy called Josh from PwC, kept ringing me every single day and leaving a voicemail, please ring me back. Eventually he got through to me and I went, all right, okay, Josh, tell me what you've got to say. He says, I want you to join this PwC Tech Scale-Up program in Leeds, the first one of its kind. I begrudgingly said yes because he told me I'd be the only woman on the program and he'd have his arse kicked if I didn't join. I said, okay. So I joined the program reluctantly, thinking, well, okay, I'm going to just see what I learn. And I met some of the most amazing people that transformed my business and me over that period. Gordon Bateman I met, the guy that's running this event. Rochelle Schuster from Leeds City Council now, but at the time was at Grant Thornton. These people gave me the confidence and the network to understand that I could find a path to continuing to grow my business, but give my original investors the support they needed to de-risk their position. But who are these investors I need to speak to? the supply side of things. Well, in Leeds at the time, there was only 5 really active investors. And it's a real, as anybody who lives here knows, everybody knows each other. I'd met most of them for a coffee before we ever did a pitch. But it's a small community. And most of them were generalists getting into the tech space, but there weren't really any specialists at the time. Rochelle, who was the person I met through the PwC programme, said to me, come to Grant Thornton, we'll help you to navigate and widen the pool, give you more choices. And it was because she was a woman, I hadn't met any others. I went, yeah, I trust you. I'm going to go and work with Grant Thornton to help me run a process, and that was the decision I made. It was no risk. It was literally a contingent fee. If we did the deal, I paid them. If we didn't, I didn't. There was no risk. Thank you, Rochelle. And that gave me the confidence to go to my board, who went, okay, so we're going to run a process. You need to get me twice the valuation that these acquirers have offered. I went, bring it on, no problem. And that's what we did. We went out, 30 pitches, half in the north of England, half in the south. By the end of that process, we'd raised 4.5 million, 2 million of secondary, but the money came from a Yorkshire investment firm. Thank you, David, from YFM. So why didn't I get any interest from London? Well, when I pitched to London, I was used to being in rooms full of men. Come on, I'm in the tech sector. 17% of the roles in tech are filled by women. It's normal. I wasn't fazed by the fact that I was in a room full of investors that were male. What I was fazed by and really surprised by, one, it was less diverse in the tech sector. I mean, come on, I thought tech was bad. But worse than that was they had no idea what was going on in Leeds. I mean, they literally asked me, isn't it textile factories and coal mill? I'm not kidding you. Someone asked me, isn't it textile factories and coal mines in Yorkshire? Is there a tech sector in Yorkshire? Are there any tech people in Yorkshire? I found myself educating them in Leeds before I could tell them about my business, never mind my gender bias. So 18,000 STEM graduates out of the universities of Leeds. I mean, that's fantastic, right? We have tech people here. So ecosystem can be a challenge, not because it doesn't exist, but because people don't know about it. That is a big problem for us. We have 2 biases when we're pitching businesses. I have a gender bias that I have to navigate around, but I also have a northern bias. So when I got invited to be on the task force, it was obvious to me, this is a perfect opportunity for me to lean into 2 agendas I care about. Diversity and ensuring that there is as many people as possible accessing capital so they can grow businesses. And yes, we're starting with gender, but it's not just about gender. Let's be honest, there's a bigger problem here. But also there's this accessing capital and having more of that in the north. What we've done today, and if you have time, I'm wearing this no-code lap top on, which is another project that I run. Go over to the hack, please. You'll see what we're doing over there. There's 10 no-code teams that are full of non-techies building MVPs to problems. And they're doing it without any skills, there's no coders, and one of the things we're building is an ecosystem data hub. And that will help any investors, entrepreneurs, or advisors to navigate the ecosystem here. And to give you some stats, we've got 10 accelerators and incubators in Leeds. We've got 10 academic institutions, 5 angel investor groups, 24 networking organizations just for startups, 10 investment funds, twice as many as there was when I raised in 2019. And I can go on. So if you want to know what's actually going on here and you don't know, and I can tell you people in Leeds don't know what's going on here, we've got the data. Come and have a look. So why do we need to do this now, and why does the task force matter? We're at the bottom of the G7. Looks like we're going to be at the bottom of the G20 as well. We need to accelerate growth. Levelling up is slow. Investment zones are a long-term play. What can we do now? Rose Review said 230 billion can be generated if we bridge the gap. Leeds is number 2 in all of the startup ecosystems in the UK. We have 668 high-growth enterprises here that employ 73,000 people and contribute 10 billion to the economy. And investors are taking notice. In 2022, £288 million worth of capital was invested in Leeds, in tech firms alone, 88% up on the previous year. Only 5% of high-growth enterprises, those are businesses that are growing at 20% year on year, as classified by the OECD, are female-founded. And yet, those female-founded businesses, when they raise capital, on average, they raise 6 million. But turnover, 125 million. Remember those numbers? 6 million on average and 125 million. High-growth enterprises with 1 male founder, they tend to get nearly twice as much capital. It's 40% more, just under 10 million. Their average turnover is less, 93 million. Women are getting 40% less capital, but generating 20% more revenue. If there wasn't ever a really good business case for solving this problem now, to accelerate the economy and get the capital into the hands of the people that actually can help us all grow out of this and climb out of the position we're in, then that's the reason. So I'm going to invite the amazing panel from the task force to the stage. We've got 4 incredible people. Andrew Sheffield from Playfair VC, come on please. Czech Warner from Ada Ventures. Emma Sinclaire from Enterprise Alumni. June Angelides from Samos. And if we could play a quick video just summarising some of this. No, it's not playing. We're fine. They said we're not playing a video. I got the definitely not playing a video. And we'll take our seats. We'll do it at the end. Right, okay. Thank you very much, guys.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chef, and I'm an investor at Playfair. We're a £50 million pre-seed fund based in London, and twice a year we host Europe's largest diversity and inclusion event focused on women. It's called Female Founder Office Hours. So the event basically connects female-founded companies to investors for the purpose of collaboration and mentoring. And we started it in 2019, and since then we've had 1,600 founders, have 7,000 meetings, and they've gone on to raise over £600 million in future investment. And so on a personal level, I grew up a long way from the high-growth economy, and I'm really excited to be hosting this today. So the task force mission is quite simple. It's to increase the number of women high-growth businesses with a particular focus outside of London. And I'd just like to take a moment to notice how unusual it is to have a government task force at an event, on a stage, sharing progress mid-term. And they have a lot to cover, and I'm at the risk of sounding like a male interrupting a group of females as they talk about female issues, but I'll try my best to make sure they cover all the topics that they'd like to get through.
Don't worry, we're going to interrupt you if you do.
That's fine, that's fine. So you've all already met Zandra, and I'd love to introduce the rest of the panel. So check, it would be great to get a short introduction, who you are, what you do, and maybe why this is a personal story for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's so amazing to be here in Leeds today. And thank you again to all of the Climb organisers. I'm so pumped from that incredible introduction. So I'm Czech. I'm one of the co-founders of Ada Ventures. Ada Ventures is a pre-seed and seed fund. We invest in an inclusive way. So we've rebuilt the venture capital process from how we find companies, to how we select companies, to how we support founders, and actually what the founders also are, who are they serving as underlying customers, all with an inclusive lens. So we have over 100 million under management. Over 70% of the founders in our portfolio are underrepresented. Over 60% are female CEOs. And we are incredibly proud of that record. I'm also the co-founder of Diversity VC, so I've done a lot of work in collaboration actually with the British Business Bank and others on this issue. It's always been a personal issue for me. It's been something that from kind of day one, I've been really motivated by fairness and meritocracy, and I just don't understand the logic of why we're in this position. So I've been fighting to change that ever since I've been in the industry for the last 8 years.
Brilliant. Emma, it'd be great to know why this is close to your heart.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Emma Sinclaire. I am the co-founder and CEO of a B2B software company called Enterprise Alumni. We are the market leaders in alumni management software. So our software powers alumni networks for very big companies like Bank of America and LinkedIn even use our software to stay in touch with people after they leave. We're also, as far as I know, the only company to have raised money at scale and have a gender-balanced cap table, so 50-50 male-female shareholders, which was felt like a good idea and something that would be manageable. It's slowly killed me and was very, very challenging. So for anyone raising money thinking it's a great idea, honestly, I don't know that it was, but certainly we've done it, so I'm sticking with it. In terms of why this is close to my heart, I mean, look, I'm a woman, therefore, full stop, it is. But the task force is full of extremely motivated, dynamic women who are all taking on a particular issue, battle, thought process. We have the OG Helen Steers, who's in the audience today. we have a whole lineup of incredible women. And whilst there's a lot to do when you're running a business or running a fund, it felt like a group of people who were activist enough to make some change. So really happy to be participating, and congratulations to everybody on putting together this event today. I will not be beatboxing though.
No, me neither. And June, from you, please.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you all. First time in Leeds, amazing. The sun came out. So I wear a couple of hats. I'm an investor at Samos Investments. I also run an Africa syndicate, and I sit on a couple of boards. Prior to joining Samos, I ran the first child-friendly coding school for mums in tech. And before that, I was at Silicon Valley Bank. But why the task force and this issue is so important to me is obviously, as a female founder myself, I face the hurdles in trying to raise capital, but also I've been fortunate to work with so many brilliant female founders who have reached scale and still have been faced with wall after wall after wall, and it's like, when is it gonna open up, and when will it actually get easy? So we're an incredible group, and we're trying to figure out ways to solve this, and I think with help of everyone in this room, I think it's a united effort. We can't do it alone. We're hoping this will be an interactive session and get your ideas as well, but it's a real honor to be here today.
Thanks, everyone. Maybe if we can start with Czech, and could you explain maybe why you founded Ada Ventures?
Yeah, absolutely. My first job in venture was joining a team of 35 white men, an investment team of 35 white men, and I quite often kind of went to events and looked around me, and it was the same group of people from the same background, and everyone was being funded in the same way. And I just didn't feel like that was the best way to capture some of the best ideas in the country. And Ada is actually named after a woman called Ada Lovelace, who some people will know the story of. She was born in 1815. She worked on the first ever computer, but she was completely overlooked and unrecognized actually until Alan Turing, much later, realized her contribution to computing. And we believe there are people like Ada out there today. And we just thought, okay, let's just start from scratch. Let's start from first principles. How would we source founders in a different way? Instead of just saying, hey, we've got a Mayfair office, come and knock on our door and come and see us. You need to have a warm introduction to get access to us. We said, no, actually, we know that warm introductions are really unfair. You're 13 times more likely to get investment if you have a warm introduction. So why don't we flip that process on its head and actually create conduits into communities that aren't represented in venture? And that's our Scout network. It's now 100 people. We've had a third of the investments in Fund 1 have actually come from that Scout network. Some of our Scouts are actually in the room today. So we really felt there was a different way of doing venture, and that's what we are trying to prove with Ada, and actually do that in order to generate better returns for our investors. That's our belief, that we can actually generate alpha by investing in this different way.
And your focus on the task force, there's loads of different themes, but your focus is broadly on the investment side. So can you tell me what you're looking at there and what you're doing in terms of investment for the task force?
Yeah. So, clearly, high growth businesses need funding to succeed in most cases. And there's actually lots of pots of funding available for UK entrepreneurs, but many of those pots are really not accessible. For example, SEIS and EIS. Hopefully people will have heard of that, but it's a really powerful tool for investors. They get tax relief on their investment, and for entrepreneurs, now they've raised the limit so you can actually raise £250,000 under SEIS. And there's 25 billion that's been invested in UK businesses through SEIS and EIS. But only 40% of our MPs are even aware of what SEIS is, which is quite frankly quite shocking. So one of the things we're doing is really targeting that, making sure that MPs are more aware of it, making sure that female founders are much more aware of it. But we're also looking at the limited partners, the investors in venture funds. And having raised now £100 million myself, I know that it's really tough actually to be a female founder of a fund and raising money for a venture fund. And the limited partner communities actually kind of stayed totally out of this issue to date. So we've been talking a lot about what VCs can do, but they haven't really been visible. And one of the things that we have as a tool is the Investing in Women Code, which is a really practical, really helpful code, which a lot of VCs have signed, but only one limited partner has signed. And limited partners speak for hundreds of millions, if not billions, of pounds of capital. So what I'm really focused on is, can we get all of those hundreds of millions to sign the Investing in Women Code and actually get more money into female and diverse-led venture funds, because we know that there's a link between diverse-led venture funds and in funding more diverse founders. So I'm super focused on how we can get these big pools of capital into high-growth female-led businesses.
And some people might say that fundraising is just hard for everyone. So June, it'd be good to get your thoughts. Like, is there an even bigger hill for women founders to raise capital from venture investors?
Yes, sadly, I think they said the numbers had contracted and we're still back to 1% again. We made some progress and then we're back down. And it's a tough funding environment. We were just talking about this backstage, how the bar just keeps moving higher and higher in terms of what is required. I spoke to multiple founders who had succeeded in raising growth funding, but even for them, even with all the years of expertise in, understanding fundraising, they still struggled breaking down barriers and access to networks. And what we're trying to do as a subgroup, and I work with Sam Smith and Angela Scott on this, is just really thinking about what will help. Is it education? Is it more signposting to businesses and actually helping them gain revenue, which Emma will talk about procurement a bit more. But Sarah Hashemi is doing a lot of work with Buy Women Built, which is an amazing site which puts together all the amazing businesses that were started by women. And actually, the way we can all be supportive and help them on their journey is actually just to go and buy from them and being very intentional about where we put our pounds. And something else we're thinking about is the education piece. And I think Judith mentioned this earlier, where only, I think 80% of 11 to 18-year-olds could not name a single female entrepreneur. So how do we change that? How do we make sure that within every growth hub around the UK, we have entrepreneurs speaking about what they do, going into schools, but also just highlighting and saying, I'm here, this is what I'm working on, this is how you can be supportive. I think we just need to have more conversations and bring what we're doing to the forefront.
And that role models point is really interesting. So I'd love to open it up to everyone really and talk about that. So why do we have so few female high growth role models? Why is that stat that way? Does anybody have any thoughts or theories on why that problem exists and maybe how we can change it?
Well, slightly loaded question. So like now I do have loads, but I'm constantly uncovering women I've never heard of who do spectacular things. Some of my investors, one of my investors is a woman who's the first Turkish company in the world to list on NASDAQ, which she did a couple of years ago. I was on a panel with her. I'd never heard of her before. Often dubiously unprepared for a panel, not today, of course. I was listening to her, and everything she said was just incredible. And I thought, I want to be you when I grow up. And that happens all the time. Again, we've got people in the audience that are role models and icons. But quite often, I think companies are just associated with one leader, right? Facebook is Mark Zuckerberg, Twitter is now Elon Musk. So you have one person that's a leader. So quite often, as we all know, the leader is not necessarily a female. It is, I would say on the flip side, it is challenging for women to ask that question, because then we all rightly feel a responsibility to change that and go and talk in schools and do this and do that. And sometimes I think, the responsibility we feel as women to change that puts an extraordinary additional burden on us, as well as raising a fund and investing in entrepreneurs or running a business. It's a lot, but there's more. I think, amplifying each other and making sure that the press do the same and that schools do the same.
And one of the things about the task force, which is wonderful, is it's led by Anne Bowden, who is absolutely incredible and leading a fantastic UK business in Starling Bank. And I think part of the reason why all of us who probably say no to quite a few things that we may get asked to do got involved is because we saw that she was actually putting her time into this whilst running her business and saying, I want more like me. And I think we all, one thing that everyone can do very tangibly is when you do hear stories about female leaders, just share them on LinkedIn. Like, you never know who
and
you're
buy
influencing.
our stuff as well, as you were saying, really.
Yeah.
Don't just share, celebrate, invite people onto a panel, or have an event at your office, buy their stuff, or if you can't afford to buy their B2B software because you're having them to speak, buy your food, your beverage, your absolutely everything. You know, where we spend our money really matters, right?
True. And I guess just to highlight, the Scale Up Institute has done a lot of work highlighting a lot of female founders who have raised over 10.2 million. And just to flag, because I said I'm not great with numbers, I'm going to remember this now, but between the 623 startups, they have raised between them 3.7 billion pounds, and collectively their turnover is 20.1 billion pounds, and they're contributing to the economy by providing 159,000 jobs. So it's not charity, and I think this is important that we highlight what they're doing.
And I think there's the D list that was on at the start, which is a really great way for us to start putting people forward into places that people go and look for them. So I think we've just had an absence of places to gather those role models that people know exist. So I think a bit more of that will really help. But the D list is definitely worth looking at because that's a really good showcase.
Okay. And then this is really broad, but I'd love to know, like, what you see as today are the core barriers to the enterprise task force mission, and yeah, whoever wants to take it.
I think one of the barriers is actually just marketing and actually getting our message out there, because this is so nice to be doing this today and talking about the work that we've been doing, but it's very much been behind the scenes. And I think so much of what we need to do is connect what's already happening, which is lots of really cool and great things like the D-list and pockets all over the country. And I think we just need a much better dedicated marketing event with budget. I'm talking to the government here who are in the front row. We need some budget to put behind this to say, actually, this is all the stuff that's going on. This is all the amazing initiatives like SEIS and EIS that's available. Go female founders, like start your own company and go and get it.
I can add to that. I mean, look, we all focus on or are focusing on different barriers or feel the pain in different ways. You know, I operate a business day to day. For me, you know, it's called high growth enterprise. So for me, high growth is growing in revenue. You know, we're talking about companies that need, you know, Zandra and I both run software companies. You know, I'm focusing on the revenue side of things, which there are ways to unlock and fix driving more revenue to female founders. You know, procurement, you know, winning business from large enterprises. Sales cycles take years. Large companies often have an advantage in how they move through the procurement process. And I know that we'll dig into it a little bit later, but for example, you know, that for me is the meaning of high growth. If I go to check for my Series B and I ask her for 25 million, she's probably going to want to see some really serious revenue growth and some really serious potential. Seeing if I can put her on the spot to say yes right now, but she hasn't. But I'll see what I can do after the panel. But so, you know, when you think about the challenges to funding, the other challenges to funding are if actually you're a very high growth business with good revenue and good prospects, it is increasingly easier to find money. So a bit chicken and egg, but for me, you know, the hurdle, the barrier, the challenge, the opportunity is just to drive more revenue to your business because you are more valuable and more investable with that kind of size and scale.
Agreed. And I think one thing, yeah, I mean,
is that yes to 25 million you're about to say? Got a whole audience.
Let's talk after the panel.
Okay.
I think you were tangibly talking about how we could kind of get the convening power of the task force to get large corporates together and say, actually, do you have a budget that's dedicated for female suppliers or diverse suppliers, which is a very common thing in the US. But for some reason here it doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going through this process at the moment. It's a global process that's sort of to certify you as a woman-controlled business, because there are budgets in different parts of the world that get allocated to women-led, women-controlled, women-owned company. Australia do that with Aborigines also, and
someone in the front row is laughing at the fact that you have to go through a process to certify.
Well, look, I mean, so I'm not one for process or necessarily typically task force, but actually it credentializes in the context of a large enterprise. So, I mean, fair enough, I guess I need to be able to prove some metrics so that when I go for diversity budget, you know, we should win anyway. We're market leader, but if there's an opportunity to get an extra tick in a box in an RFP or a competitive bid, because we are from a diverse supplier, then that makes sense. Diversity budgets in procurement are not something that are in any way standard, in any way, shape or form for corporates that are domiciled in the UK. The thing that most alerted me to this being crucial is there are lots of listed UK companies who have diversity budgets, but they're overseas. So when I bid in America for a couple of contracts for FTSE 100 companies, I discovered that they are KPI'd against spending money against female founders. So we're all focusing on different things. I'm focusing on driving the agenda for diversity in procurement to exist, so that when women go up against other businesses, potentially there's an extra tick in the box to direct revenue to those people. Amazing. If anyone in the audience is from a large enterprise and is interested, please find me somehow, somewhere, because we're a small group, but trying to do a lot with that.
And I think, just adding on what, Emma says with regards to the burden around having to speak at every event and for female founders, it's unfair. But how do we find a way to shine a light on them? And I think you can't be what you can't see. When I think back to even when I was starting Mums in Tech, if I hadn't seen Amali de Alvis, then the founder of Code First Girls, I don't think I would have made that leap. And I think it's so important that female founders see founders who are a couple steps ahead of them, how they've navigated this tough environment for fundraising, how they're growing their businesses, and how they're thinking about revenue. So it really just, finding ways to continue to expedite that.
And I know that a few members of the task force and the British Business Bank as well, there's a big focus on data collection. So I know a couple of people on the panel are definitely really excited about this. So Zandra and Chet, maybe can you talk about the data collection piece that you're working on and explain why it's important?
Yeah, I alluded earlier to the fact that it's amazing how, well, people in Leeds don't know what's going on in Leeds, never mind outside of Leeds. But there is a real absence of information around the ecosystems that support. So as a female entrepreneur, what are the accelerators, the incubators, the startup office spaces? Who are the mentors? Who are the people I can go and speak to, other female founders? And how do we make data sort of an enabler of that, really? So we did some initial work in the task force around actually mapping high growth enterprises and looking at, well, what is the founder mix of female founder businesses, and that 5% stat earlier. And interestingly, what we found was that represents across the whole of the UK. It's not that we have a bigger problem in the north than we do in the south when you look at it as a proportion. So whilst the numbers, the quantum of capital raised might be greater in London, the proportions that go to female-founded businesses versus male-founded businesses are broadly the same. Equally, the pipeline of talent and the pipeline of women, 20% of women are founding businesses right now. It's 17.7% nationally as far as the number of female founders going into that kind of entrepreneurial high growth zone, but actually it's only 16.5% here. It's not a big difference. So data is a great way to get people to sort of go, well, it isn't a pipeline issue as such. It's just that if only 5% of women are becoming female high growth enterprises or female founded high growth enterprises, but we've got 20% of women starting businesses, well, that's the problem. So data can help us to make the point really of what the challenge is and helps us to understand the barrier and the gaps, but it also helps people to navigate and access the ecosystems to get that support. And that's what I think we're really trying in the regional subgroup to do, is to look at where the data gaps are so that we can better educate, which is part of what we're doing today, but also that we can better engage the community that want to participate on this agenda, the advisors, the investors, and the entrepreneurs, because that will enable them to be able to self-serve their way into finding the support they need. So it's at both ends, and hopefully, we're on a journey to doing that. If you want to see what we're practically doing, please come to the hack, because we can actually show you what we're building.
And shout out to Zandra and Paul in the Cabinet Office, who have built something absolutely incredible and really putting the rest of the task force to shame, quite frankly.
The rest of the United Kingdom to shame, quite frankly.
It's so good. And it's going to be available across the whole of the UK with all these different regional hubs, being able to look at who the accelerators are, who the angels are, who's active in the region, how much people raised. And that level of visibility is something we've never had before. So I think if that's just one thing that comes out of the task force, genuinely, it will be fantastic. But I think it's pretty scandalous, to be honest, what level or lack of data is being collected. For example, we're talking to Companies House about the fact that we need to understand who actually starts businesses, who incorporates businesses. And there is not a capture field for gender in Companies House at the moment. And that would seem to us to be a very obvious thing to do, because then we can actually figure out... Is that me?
Someone disagrees with you. Try and turn it back off.
Hopefully that's not Companies House interfering with my... They weren't very enthusiastic about our first conversation, so we're trying to beat them down. But that's one example. Also, HMRC, when people are applying to SEIS and EIS tax relief, again, that's another point at which we could collect this data and see, are people incorporating companies but actually not raising SEIS, because that's... They're really unhappy.
That's definitely the government. But during COVID, when the Future Fund was launched, I campaigned voraciously to have whether it was a male or female founder captured, and that was rejected. So I think it just needs to be a matter of policy and fact that when you are collecting information, you collect gender.
Yeah, but why do we think we're in this position? As soon as we have the data, and this is what we did a lot of with Diversity VC, is we looked at the stats, and that was where the sort of 1p in every pound original statistic came from, a collaboration with BBCA and BBB. But one of the stats that I remember quite clearly from the first study we did was that 2/3 of investment teams in the UK had no women on them at all. 85% of investment committees had no women on them at all. And these stats actually make people pretty kind of horrified, frankly, which they should. And that's what creates change. So I think data is massively important to this conversation.
Agree.
Okay, and Emma, you mentioned procurement rules in the US and also revenue. It'd be good to know where the UK are, where we stack up against other countries and their policies that they have, maybe the US, maybe others as well. It'd be good to know what you see as the leaders in this problem.
Yeah, I'm a novice in this, but I think actually compared to, it turns out that there's not a lot of people that have been looking at this. What I have learned is that it's not prevalent anywhere spectacularly, and there are pockets, like everywhere in life, where people are making progress. In the US government, in the federal government, for government procurement, it's quite a mainstream concept to look for diverse founders, whether that is women, whether it is Latinos. That's typically measured and looked at very carefully. Just not so much in the private sector. It is in some parts of the US. It is in some very large corporates internationally. But it's just not done methodically. And it's certainly something that I'd say was done less here than anywhere else I've been looking at, particularly Australia and the USA. It seems like an easy win, because if I think about youngish companies, we're a youngish company, we're a scale-up, not a startup. But it takes a long time to build a sort of B2B enterprise software company, because it takes a long time to sell to companies. And over that period, you want to ask yourself, do those companies need and want the innovation? They do. And I constantly feel that one of the challenges is simply getting through the door. And I don't mean that we don't have a sales team. I don't mean we're not capable of selling. We've got massive customers. But the procurement process, the process to actually be approved as a buyer in large businesses is such... I remember the first 10 deals we did. I mean, it was just absolutely impossible. And by unlocking that, I think we'd be unlocking the British economy anyway, because it would make it easier for brighter, brilliant businesses to help companies with the problems they need to solve. So first of all, I think it just more broadly, the concept of procurement and making it easier to do business with people is something I think solved. I went to a meeting last week where someone told me that it was easier to do a piece of business for £100 million than it was for £100 with a company, and it sort of crushed part of my heart, because that's just absolutely insane, but I mean, he meant it. And then more broadly for our task force agenda, we are talking about high growth. How can we drive more deals from the government? So the government spend a lot of money, drive more government money to female scale-ups, but also more broadly to businesses. I would love, when we're talking about ESG and impact agenda, I'd love it to not just be charity is magnificent, but it's as you said, it's not charity. And if we're talking about impact and we're talking about innovation, I'd love part of that to be unlocking, doing more business with female-founded businesses. So watch this space, because it's one of the topics that we're all thinking hard about.
Yeah, and I think lots of people in this room will either be running businesses or be working with businesses closely, looking through your supplier list and looking at, where are you actually putting your cash? And are those businesses diverse owned or not?
Yeah. Echo that.
Yeah.
And that's a national level. Zandra, I know you're super active in and around Leeds and around this region. why is London so different? We hear this a lot. Is London so different from the rest of the ecosystem? And if so, why?
It's a good question. I'm looking at the clock. You know, you've got
Yeah.
this countdown
Audience.
clock, and it's like,
Okay.
it's like literally. So very quickly, I think, on that point. So as a Leeds founder, female founder, and going to London, I'm amazed at just how much more there is in London available to founders. But it's a much bigger ecosystem, so it's going to be. It's more established ecosystem, so it's going to be. There are more businesses based there and being founded there, so it's going to be. So it is just a function of the scale and size of the city, and I think we just got to be honest about that. It's never going to be the same here in Leeds, but there is actually a big gap in the fact that there's lots of brilliant kind of initiatives, accelerators, incubators, funds that could have a satellite base in these regions, and we've got to find a way to take the best of what's going on in a city like London that has got a lot of things right and make sure that that starts to bring that out into the regions, and we've got to do a better job in the regions of selling what we're really good at here, what are the skills we've got here, what are our specialisms, what are the things that we have gaps in, so that people outside London go, actually, Leeds has got a really great health tech, fintech, legal tech ecosystem. That's my investment thesis. I should have a space there. And the same for advisors. So it goes both ways. So there's some brilliant things happening in London. We need to find a way of drawing that into the regions and making a place and a space for those people to be here. So of course it's different, but there's loads of opportunity for us to kind of accelerate and piggyback on the great work that's happening.
And I feel like Leeds University must surely be able to help, because I went to Leeds University and I'll be honest, I've only been up here 3 times since, and it was quite a long time ago. The change is shocking. I feel very old. But, you know, for example, I feel like the Leeds Business School or Leeds University must surely be able to help, because there's a massive diaspora. And in coming up here, I came to see clients, I came to meet new clients.
Yep.
It's just, you just need to get people, just need to push people over the edge to get started.
We do, just getting them into those spaces, like
Yeah.
you say, there's Nexus is amazing. If you brought people there and they saw it, they'd go, okay, there's a really brilliant innovation startup ecosystem here in health tech. Why didn't I know about it? So, yeah.
I said that time might get away, and it has, and I wanted more time to discuss this, but we did want this to be actionable, and so I'd love to get each of your thoughts really quickly on just what actionable next steps should be taken to bring about change, really quickly.
Companies House incorporating gender data. LPs, not just one, but hundreds, signing the Investing in Women Code.
My list is long, but I think I'll just go with looking at how you spend your money on a small scale, but also at an enterprise level. I'm interested in the budgets of 10 million, 100 million, and $1 billion that are being spent on software and services, and making sure that a chunk of that is directed towards women.
And I'll just highlight, spend the time getting to know the women building businesses in your local areas, talk about them, speak to them, and see how you can be helpful to them.
And making sure that every city in the UK understands itself so that it can help others to understand it using data.
And that is all we have time for.
Thank you.
So I'd like to thank everyone for listening. Thank you to the task force.
And we have a
if
video.
there is a video to be played,
Yes.
we would love it to be played.
Let's
right
play
now.
the
Thank you,
video.
Ryan.
Should we move to the side?
We'll go off. Okay.